Hey everyone, it's Aaron Hughes from FuDog Group. In this video, I'm going to be talking about leadership, and specifically, I'm going to be talking about a quality that leaders should expect from their team, but it's a quality that doesn't get talked about very much. And I think it's important. I don't think it gets enough airplay, but in my team, they know that I have this expectation. I mention it to them frequently, and I'm sharing it with you because it is a quality that I think more leaders should expect from their team. It will help your team communicate properly and be more effective, be more productive, get more done, and will just give you peace of mind as a leader knowing that projects are moving forward. So, before I get into what the specific quality is, let me tell you about how I first learned it, because I learned it the hard way. Years ago, I was a young newbie manager of a small team, and I can't remember the specifics of what happened, but something happened. Maybe a vendor acted unexpectedly, or a customer didn't pay, and I was caught off guard. I had expected whatever was supposed to happen. I'd expected it to happen, and it didn't. I was caught off guard, and in some way, kind of that got to the area manager, and I hadn't been able to fix it or to deal with it. And so it got kind of escalated up the food chain of the organization. The area manager heard about it, and we had a conversation, which is fine and should be expected. So he sat me down one day for lunch, and we were talking about this scenario, this fairly serious situation, whatever it was that happened. It was serious at the time, although not serious enough for me to remember the specifics this far along in the future. But anyway, he sat me down for lunch, and we were talking, and he's like, well, tell me what happened. And then, so I told him, well, I was expecting this to happen and this, but then, it didn't happen. And he's like, well, what did you do about it? And what didn't happen? What should have happened? What were you thinking would happen? And, how did you deal with it? Anyway, after going through the details and discussing it in depth, he said a piece of advice that I have never, ever forgotten, and I have taken it with me in every work scenario I've ever had since, whether it was working for someone else or working for myself, or even like in other leadership components in like a volunteer capacity. And his advice was this, and hopefully you'll excuse the language that I use. He said, always be on top of your shit. He says, like, never let yourself be surprised. So if you've got family around, let's say, or kids, let's say, always be on top of your stuff. All right, that's what I'm going to say for the rest of this video. Always be on top of your stuff and never let yourself be surprised. And I thought about it at the time. I thought, oh, okay, that's good. I will adopt that. But I really internalized it, and it became central to how I operated from then on. Again, both in that work scenario and future work scenarios, in business, and even in volunteer leadership settings. And not only did I hold that as a quality for myself, I would hold that as an expectation as a leader for my team. I would expect my team to have the same thing. Always be on top of your stuff and never let yourself be surprised. So what does that mean? Well, it means I'm going to use three sort of like subcategories or three like examples, but I think this is actually a fairly broad quality that that could mean even more than the three examples I'm giving. So the first, the way that you can kind of always be on top of your stuff and never let yourself be surprised. The first example is to keep amazing notes and know exactly where the project is at all times. So, if I were, as a leader, if I were to talk to a team member and I'm asking them, hey, how's this project going? I don't want to hear, it's going all right. I can't remember where I am right now, and I haven't looked at it in a little while. What I'd rather hear is, here are my notes. here's the date I did this and the date I did this, and I did this today, and now I'm waiting for this person, and my plan is to follow up with that person tomorrow, and I got these 3 more steps for it to be completed. So knowing exactly where the project is, what you've done, what you're waiting on, any obstacles or roadblocks, and what the next steps are, where the project is continuing to go toward completion. So always be on top of your stuff and never let yourself be surprised. Number 1 is keep amazing, thorough, complete, clear project notes and know exactly what's happening in the project. The second way that you can always be on top of your stuff and never let yourself be surprised is by following up and closing loops. So as a leader, I can tell you that very often I have gone to team members or even people I've been working with who aren't maybe employed by me, but it could be in a volunteer capacity, or it could have been a vendor when I was a freelancer. And I would go to these team members and I'd be like, oh, have you done this thing? And they would say, well, yeah, I left a message for the person. And I don't want to just hear, I left a message for the person. I'd like to hear, oh, I left a message for the person on such and such a day. This is what we said. And then I followed up with them again the day after, and I didn't hear back from them. And so I'm actually reaching out to them again today. So there's this level of accountability and ownership in a communication. I think all too often, you might hear this in your own team where yeah, I followed up with a person. Well, when did you do that? Like 2 weeks ago. I left them a message on their voicemail, never heard back. I want to see a level of ownership on that communication, so that they're not just leaving a voicemail 2 weeks ago, they are leaving a voicemail, following up a little bit later, maybe email, maybe text, maybe Facebook Messenger. I'm not saying they should hound the person, but I'm saying there is kind of this level of back and forth communication expectation, and I don't want the project to just flounder because they left a message 2 weeks ago, but don't even remember what they told the person 2 weeks ago. So the way that a team member can be on top of their stuff and never let themselves be surprised is by constantly following up and owning a conversation, owning a communication all the way through until the end of that conversation. So that's number 2. Number 1's manage a project, know the project, exactly where it is, and keep good notes. Number 2 is follow up and own that conversation. And then number 3, the third piece of knowing your stuff and never letting yourself be surprised is to think proactively and realistically about what could go wrong. What could go wrong? So let's say you're doing something for a client, or maybe a vendor is supposed to do something for you, and it doesn't happen. A good, proactive, realistic approach of knowing your stuff and never letting yourself be surprised is to say, okay, what happens if the vendor doesn't follow through the way I expected? Or what happens if the customer doesn't do the thing that I was hoping? Because sometimes people surprise you, and sometimes they say one thing and then do something else. That's just kind of human nature. But as the owner of a project, as someone who shouldn't ever be surprised and always knows their stuff, you should try to think proactively about what's the best case scenario here. What's the worst case? What happens if there's a wrinkle in it, and what can I do about it? Now that may sound pessimistic, and I love to be wrong if I were to think, oh, this vendor might not come through for me. If they do come through for me, that's amazing, and that happens more often than not. That's great. I love that I was wrong about my pessimism. At the same time, I don't mean to intentionally be pessimistic. I just want to be realistic, and I want to be proactive to think, okay, what could go wrong? All right, if this vendor's not able to do something for me, can I source that thing from someone else so that I can still deliver, what's expected of me to the people who need whatever needs to be delivered? So always knowing your stuff and never letting yourself be surprised, a key part of that is to just think proactively, realistically, and maybe even slightly pessimistically to think what could go wrong. And that's not to say that nothing will ever go wrong that you didn't anticipate. There's still going to be things out of the blue that you never even thought was possible. But by thinking ahead proactively of what could go wrong, you're really diminishing the likelihood of being unprepared. So there may still once in a while be things that you aren't prepared for, but more often than not, you're prepared for best case scenario, worst case scenario, and maybe something in between. And that's going to basically be like 95% of the situations you face. And then, hey, if something comes along and UFOs fly out of the sky, you never predicted that, well, you'll have to deal with that minor 5% outlier situation if it happens. But the other 95% of the time, you are prepared. So that is my leadership tip for all the leaders out there, and in fact, all the team members out there too. Whether you're a leader, whether you're a team member, one of the most important qualities that I believe leaders should expect of their team and team members should adopt, and it's a quality that no one ever really talks about, is the quality of always knowing your stuff and never letting yourself be surprised. And I hope that you use it in your team, both with yourself, with your team. Adopt it, embrace it, use it as a way to follow through with integrity and deliver on the things that you say. All right, everyone, have an amazing day.